Welcome to the Sleep Carriage. My name is Christopher. Tonight we are going to step back to a time when the world felt both smaller and infinitely larger. A time when the map of your life was drawn by the village you were born in, the fields you worked, and the deep, dark woods that bordered them. We're journeying to the edge of the fairy forest, a place where folklore wasn't just a story for children, but a practical guide for survival. And let's be honest, given that survival often depended on not annoying the invisible, powerful beings who lived under the hill, you probably wouldn't survive this. It was a subtle and complicated world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always nice to see where everyone is settling in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake, not to a sound, but to a subtle shift in the darkness. The deep, velvet black of night has thinned to the charcoal gray of pre-dawn. There is no birdsong yet, only a profound and heavy silence that presses in on the walls of your small cottage. You lie still for a moment under a coarse wool blanket, listening. You listen for the wind in the thatch of the roof. You listen for the soft sigh of the embers in the hearth. You listen for anything out of the ordinary. But there is nothing. Only the familiar, sleeping quiet of your home. Slowly you swing your legs over the side of the low bed. The packed earth floor is cold against the soles of your feet, a familiar shock that chases the last remnants of sleep away. The air itself is chilly, carrying the damp scent of moss and old stone and the faintest lingering trace of wood smoke from last night's fire. This is the first moment of your day, every day. This is the rhythm of life. Your first task is always the same, the fire. Coaxing it back to life is a quiet, careful ritual. You kneel on the hearth, the rough stone cool against your knees. The embers from the night before are nestled under a thick blanket of ash, a technique passed down through generations to keep a spark of life glowing through the long, dark hours. You gently blow on the faint orange pulse, your breath a soft whisper in the stillness. The glow brightens a tiny, sleeping heart. You add a few slivers of dry kindling, placing them just so, like building a nest. Then a larger piece of wood. You don't rush. A fire is a stubborn thing. It wakes on its own terms. As a small, confident flame finally licks up the side of the log, you feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. This small victory against the cold and the dark is the foundation of your entire day. With the fire established, the cottage begins to feel like a home again. With the growing light from the fire and the single small window cut into the thick wall, you begin your morning chores. You move with a slow, practiced economy of motion. There is no wasted energy. You lift a heavy wooden bucket, the iron handle cold in your grip, and step outside. The air that greets you is sharp and clean. It smells of wet leaves and pine needles and the promise of rain later in the day. Your cottage is the last one in the village, perched right on the edge of the great forest. The trees stand like a solid wall of darkness, their tops still lost in the morning mist. They are not friendly trees, not the kind you see in tidy parks. These are old, gnarled, and impossibly tall, a silent army of giants watching over the village. Some people say the woods are just woods, a place for firewood and forage and game. But the old ones, the ones with the faraway look in their eyes, they know better. They know the forest has rules. You walk the short, muddy path to the village well. The ground is soft under your simple leather shoes. Great. Another day of mud. You can see the smoke beginning to rise from the chimneys of the other cottages, faint gray plumes against the lightning sky. You hear the distant, grumpy lowing of a cow and the sharp crow of a rooster, finally deciding the day has officially begun. The sounds are comforting, a reminder that you are part of this small, tightly woven community. Here everyone knows everyone. Everyone knows who is sick, who is feuding, and who has a new baby on the way. And everyone knows who respects the forest, and who doesn't. Back inside, with a full bucket of water, you set a small iron pot over the fire to heat for porridge. The meal is the same most mornings: oats, water, a pinch of precious salt. If you're lucky, maybe a spoonful of honey or a few dried berries. As you stir the mixture with a wooden spoon, you stare into the dancing flames. Your hands are rough, the palms calloused and the knuckles scraped from a lifetime of hard work. They are strong hands, capable hands. They know how to mend a fence, churn butter, spin wool, and get a fish. They are the hands that keep you alive. The cottage is simple. One room. The walls are wattle and daub, a lattice of woven branches packed with clay, mud, and straw. The wooden beams above you are dark with soot from generations of fires. Everything you own has a purpose. The wooden chest in the corner holds your few items of clothing. The hooks on the wall hold pots, pans, and bundles of dried herbs. A small table and 2 stools are the only furniture besides your bed. There is a sense of deep, abiding history in this small space. You can feel the presence of those who lived here before you, who woke to this same cold floor, who tended this same hearth. As you eat your porridge, sitting on a stool by the fire, you look again towards the forest through the open doorway. The sun is now high enough to send a few weak, golden rays through the canopy, but they don't penetrate far. The woods remain dark, mysterious, and deeply private. You were taught from childhood not to stare into the woods for too long. It's considered an invitation. You were taught never to enter without a clear purpose, never to take more than you need, and never, ever to wander from the path. The forest, you were told, is another country with its own people and its own laws. They call them the good folk, the gentry, the people of the hill. They never, ever call them fairies. To name them is to draw their attention, and that is the last thing anyone wants. Historians often note that for people of this time, the world was alive with unseen forces. What we might call superstition was, for you, a simple and practical reality. A sudden illness, a cow's milk drying up, a tool going missing, these weren't random acts of misfortune. They were signs. They were the result of some broken rule, some offense given, perhaps unintentionally, to the neighbors in the woods. Life is a delicate negotiation, a constant effort to maintain a fragile peace. You finish your meal, scraping the last of the porridge from the bowl. The day is waiting. There is water to be hauled for washing, a garden to be weeded, perhaps some mending to be done. The rhythm of life pulls you forward. But always, at the edge of your senses, is the forest. You can feel its immense, quiet presence. You can smell it in the air. You can hear it in the silence between the sounds of the village. It is a part of your world, as real and as vital as the sun that warms your face and the earth beneath your feet. And you know with a certainty that runs deeper than thought, that you must be careful. Always you must be careful. The morning's work begins in the small patch of cultivated land behind your cottage. This is your garden, a small rectangle of order carved out of the wild. Your hands, rough and familiar with the earth, move steadily, pulling weeds from around the tender shoots of beans and cabbages. The soil is dark and cool, clinging to your fingers. The work is simple, repetitive, and allows your mind to drift. This is the rhythm of life, the turning of the seasons marked by the turning of the soil. From here, you can see the forest's edge with perfect clarity. It is a literal and metaphorical line. On your side, the ground is cleared, the plants grow in neat rows, the sun reaches everything. On the other side, just a few feet away, the world changes. The forest floor is a chaotic tangle of roots, moss, and last year's fallen leaves. Ancient trees crowd together, their branches interlocking to form a dense canopy that blots out the sky. It is a place of deep, perpetual shadow, even on the brightest of days. And as you work, you practice the unspoken rules. They are so deeply ingrained in you that they are no longer conscious thoughts but instincts. The first rule is that you never work with your back to the woods for too long. Every few minutes, you straighten up, ostensibly to ease your back, and you cast a slow, deliberate glance over your shoulder. You're not looking for anything specific. It's more of a feeling, an acknowledgement, a way of saying, I know you're there. I am being respectful. The silence of the woods is a living thing and it feels attentive. The second rule concerns sound. The air is full of the gentle noises of your morning, the scrape of your trowel, the buzz of a fat bumblebee investigating your herbs, the distant bleating of sheep. These are safe sounds. But sometimes, other sounds drift from the trees. A snatch of music so beautiful it makes your heart ache. The sound of a tinkling bell where no bell should be. Or, most unsettling of all, your own name called in a voice that sounds almost familiar. The rule is absolute. You do not respond. You do not look up. You do not even acknowledge that you've heard it. You simply continue with your work, your movements perhaps a little more rigid, your focus on the earth a little more intense. To answer is to accept an invitation. And no one in their right mind accepts that invitation. You work your way along a row of herbs, their scents rising as you brush against them. The sharp tang of mint, the earthy smell of thyme. Your fingers are gentle here. These herbs are for cooking but also for medicine. A poultice for a cut, a tea for a fever. Knowledge of these plants is another form of protection. Some historians believe that folk magic was simply the science of its day, a way of understanding the world through observation and tradition. And your knowledge of these plants feels both practical and a little bit magical. You come to the edge of your garden, near the low stone wall that marks its boundary. Just on the other side, in the forest itself, stands a hawthorn tree. It is old, its trunk gnarled and twisted into a strange, hunched shape, and its branches are draped with moss that hangs like an old man's beard. In the spring it is covered in a cloud of white blossoms, and in the autumn, its branches are heavy with blood-red berries. No one touches this tree. It is a well-known fact, a piece of common knowledge as solid as the belief that the sun will rise tomorrow. Hawthorn trees belong to the people of the hill. To cut one down or even to break a branch from it is to invite ruin upon your home. You have seen the proof yourself. Years ago, a newcomer to the village, a man full of loud talk and new ideas, decided the tree blocked the light. He took an axe to one of its main branches. Within a week, his prize cow had died, and by the end of the season, his roof had collapsed in a storm. He was gone by winter. Coincidence, perhaps. But no one has touched the tree since. Some modern scholars might suggest these rules were a primitive form of conservation. Don't cut the hawthorn because its berries feed the birds in winter. Don't wander from the path because you could get lost or eaten by a wolf. Don't respond to strange sounds because it might be a predator luring you in. It's a logical way to look at it. But as you stand there, feeling the cool air that seems to pool around the ancient tree, you know it's more than that. It is about respect. It's about acknowledging that the world is much older and stranger than you are, and that you are only a small part of it. There's a mystery here that logic can't quite touch. The third unspoken rule is about offerings. It's a quiet, almost secret tradition. When you have a good bake, you might leave a small piece of bread on the stone wall. When the cow gives good milk, you might pour a little into a hollow in the hawthorn's roots. It is not a payment exactly. It's more like a polite nod to your neighbors, a gesture of goodwill. There are stories, of course, of those who have been rewarded for such kindnesses. A lost tool mysteriously reappearing on the doorstep. A sudden, inexplicable luck in finding mushrooms. But you don't do it for a reward. You do it because it's the right thing to do. It's how you maintain the balance. There are darker rules too. Rules for the night. You never throw water out after sunset, lest you douse a passing spirit. You never speak of them after the fire has been banked. And you never ever whistle in the dark near the woods. Whistling is too close to their music, a mimicry they might take as a challenge, or worse, an invitation to a dance you would never return from. You finish your work in the garden and gather your tools. The sun is higher now, casting longer shadows. You take one last look at the wall of trees, at the ancient, watching hawthorn. The unspoken rules are a map for navigating a world that is only half seen. They are the fence that protects the small, warm, firelit world of your village from the vast, cold, starlit world of the forest. And as you turn back to your cottage, you feel the familiar sense of relief, the feeling of stepping back across a threshold into your own safe, predictable world, leaving the mysteries of the forest behind you. For now. You step back inside the cottage, pulling the heavy wooden door closed behind you. The simple act of dropping the latch into place feels significant. It is a drawing of a boundary, a declaration that this small, warm space is yours, a sanctuary from the vast, watching wilderness outside. The light in here is dim and soft, coming mostly from the gentle, rhythmic breathing of the fire in the hearth. The air is still and smells of smoke and dried herbs. This is your haven. But it's not just the thick walls and the sturdy door that make it feel safe. Your home is protected by an older, quieter form of security. It is layered with simple defenses, small but potent charms woven into the very fabric of the cottage. You don't think of them often any more than you think about the roof over your head, but they are there, a constant, silent reassurance. Your eyes are drawn, as they often are, to the dark line of the wooden lintel above the door. Hammered deep into the ancient oak is a single hand-forged iron nail. It is long and bent, its head flattened by 100 years of rust and time. It is perhaps the most important object in the entire house. It is a well-known fact, a truth passed down from your grandmother's grandmother, that the good folk cannot abide cold iron. The metal burns them, repels them, disrupts their magic. That one simple nail transforms your doorway from an opening into a barrier they cannot cross. Historians debate the origins of this belief. Some say it dates back to the mists of the Iron Age, a folk memory of when new peoples with superior iron weapons displaced older Bronze Age cultures. These displaced people, in this theory, were remembered in stories as a magical race who feared the new, strange metal. Others think the reason is simpler, that iron represents the hard, mundane, industrious world of humanity, a force that tamed the wild and drove the magic from the land. For you, the reason doesn't matter. The truth of it is as solid and real as the iron itself. Your world is full of it. The heavy cooking pot that hangs over your fire is iron. The poker you use to stir the logs is iron. The small, sharp knife you use for your vegetables is iron. Each object is not just a tool but a small shield, a piece of everyday magic that keeps the other world at bay. On the rough wooden shelf above the hearth, next to a bundle of dried lavender, sits a small clay bowl filled with coarse, grayish salt. Salt is another powerful defense. It is pure, incorruptible, a symbol of the earth's clean, honest substance. When a baby is born in the village, a pinch of salt is placed in its cradle. Before a long journey, a traveler will put a few crystals in their pocket. You sprinkle a line of it across the windowsill on certain nights of the year when the veil between the worlds is said to be thin. It is a simple defense but potent. You believe it can stop anything malevolent from entering, that its sharp, crystalline nature is anathema to the shifting ethereal forms of the forest spirits. Your hands, rough from the garden soil, reach into the pocket of your apron. Your fingers close around a small, hard lump. It's a crust of stale bread. This is another kind of protection, one for when you must leave the safety of your home. The old stories are full of tales of travelers who are lured by the gentry with feasts of magical food and drink. To eat even a single bite of their food is to be trapped in their realm forever, unable to return to your own time and place. Carrying your own food, even a humble dry crust of bread, is a way of anchoring yourself to your world. It is a reminder of the simple, wholesome reality of your own hearth, a charm against the intoxicating glamour of theirs. Near the window, half hidden behind a drying bundle of chamomile, hangs another small charm. It is a hold stone, a smooth, gray river rock with a perfect, naturally formed hole right through its center. You found it on the bank of the stream last spring. These are considered lucky finds. Some people hang them in their barns to protect the animals from being bewitched or ridden through the night by mischievous spirits. They are also called seeing stones. The stories say that if you close one eye and peer through the hole with the other, you can see the world as it truly is. You can see through the glamour and perceive the fairies in their true forms. You have never tried this. A part of you is deeply curious, but a much larger, more sensible part of you knows that some things are better left unseen. So it hangs there, not as a window but as another kind of shield. Its presence is enough. These are the things that protect you. Not high magic or grand incantations, but the simple earthly substances that make up your daily life. Iron, salt, bread, and stone. They are the physical embodiment of the unspoken rules, a quiet but firm declaration of your place in the world. They make your small cottage a fortress, not of stone and mortar, but of belief. As the fire pops and settles, casting a warm, flickering glow on the rough walls, you feel a deep sense of peace. And here you are safe. And here the rhythm of life is steady and predictable. The strange music of the forest cannot reach you, and the shadows under the trees must keep their distance. You are home. As the sun bleeds away below the horizon, the world outside your door surrenders to a deep and profound darkness. There is no moon tonight, and the stars are hidden by a thick blanket of cloud. The night is absolute. Inside, however, your small cottage is alive with the warm, dancing light of the hearth. The day's long labor is done, and the evening has settled in. This, too, is part of the rhythm of life, the time for rest, for community, for stories. An elderly woman from the next cottage over, Elspeth, is sitting on a stool close to the fire. Her face is a beautiful, intricate map of wrinkles, and her eyes, though clouded with age, seem to see things that others miss. Her hands, gnarled but never still, are busy mending a piece of cloth, but her attention is on the small group gathered around her. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and damp wool. The only sounds are the crackle and hiss of the logs and the low, steady murmur of her voice. Evenings like this are how history is passed down. Not in books, for you cannot read, but in the living, breathing act of telling. Elspeth is the village's library, its keeper of memories and warnings. And tonight her stories are of the woods. You must never follow the lights, she says, her voice a dry rustle like autumn leaves. My own uncle, when he was a young man, was walking home from the next village at twilight. He saw a wee light bobbing along just ahead of him like a lantern. Thinking it was another traveler, he called out and followed it off the path. She pauses, her needle stopping for a moment. Everyone leans in even though they have heard this story a dozen times. He said he walked for what felt like an hour, through thorns and boggy ground, the light always just out of reach. It finally winked out, leaving him utterly lost in the dark. He wandered all night. When he stumbled back into the village the next morning, his clothes were torn and his hair was white as snow. He had been gone for 20 years. A quiet murmur ripples through the small audience. The idea is terrifying. To lose your whole life in a single night. This concept of fairy time, moving at a different pace from human time, is a well-known fact of the tales. To step into their world even for a moment is to become untethered from your own. It is the deepest kind of being lost. Next, she tells the story of Thomas the farmer, a cautionary tale about the dangers of bargains. Thomas was a good man but proud, Elspeth begins. And one year the rains wouldn't come. His crops withered in the fields. He had a wife and new baby to feed. In his desperation he went to the edge of the forest to the old hawthorn tree, and he asked for help. He promised them anything. The fire pops, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. The next day the rains came. A gentle, steady rain that lasted 3 days and saved his crops. He had the best harvest of his life. He grew rich, but he forgot his promise. On the child's first birthday, the cradle was found empty. Not a sound had been heard. They never saw the babe again. Thomas's wealth turned to ash in his mouth. The message is clear and brutal. Their help is not a gift. It is a loan, and the interest is always impossibly high. You do not ask them for favors. You do not make deals. You keep to your side of the boundary and they will, perhaps, keep to theirs. You often wonder if these stories are true accounts, or just warnings dressed up as memories. Some folklorists of the future will argue these tales were a form of social control, a way to keep people on the straight and narrow path, to discourage greed or straying too far from the village. But as the firelight dances on Elspeth's ancient face, making deep shadows in the hollows of her cheeks, it's impossible not to believe. The fear in the room feels too real, too old. Finally, she tells the darkest story of all, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It is the story of the changeling. You remember the weaver's boy? A beautiful, happy child. Laughed all the time. Then one afternoon, his mother left him sleeping in his cradle near an open window while she went to the well. When she came back, the child in the cradle was different. It looked the same, but it did nothing but scream. It was a thin, constant wail that curdled the milk and frayed the nerves. It would not be soothed. It grew sickly and pale, and its eyes seemed too old, too knowing. A chill runs through you. This is the greatest fear. That they will steal a human child and leave one of their own in its place, an old, withered fairy disguised as a baby. Elspeth leans forward. They tried everything. Hung iron scissors over the cradle. Left out bread and salt. But the thing just wailed. The weaver and his wife became shadows of themselves, worn down by the sorrow and the sound. The story hangs in the air, unfinished, its ending too terrible to speak aloud. As if sensing the heavy mood, Elspeth offers a strange, practical piece of advice. "But if one should ever follow you," she says, her tone becoming brisk, "you spill a handful of seeds on the path behind you, or salt. They are compelled to stop and count every grain before they can continue. It will give you time to get to safety." This odd, quirky tradition that the great and terrible Fae can be distracted by a mundane counting task is a small comfort, a sliver of human cunning against their vast and unknowable magic. The fire is burning low now, the logs collapsing into a soft, glowing pile of embers. The stories are done. One by one, the neighbors get up to leave, pulling their cloaks tight and murmuring their good nights before slipping out into the impenetrable darkness. Soon you are alone again with the dying fire. The tales of the evening cling to the air like smoke, a fresh layer of caution settled over your soul. Your hands are rough, your life is hard, but it is your own. And as you bank the fire for the night, you know you will do whatever it takes to keep it that way. The next morning, the rhythm of life is broken. You wake, tend the fire, and step outside into the pale, misty dawn, and a cold knot of unease tightens in your stomach. Your goat, a stubborn, clever creature named Daisy who provides you with precious milk, is gone. Her small pen is empty, the gate swinging slightly in the breeze, a wooden latch broken. Perhaps it was a wolf, but there are no tracks, no signs of a struggle. She has simply vanished. You spend the first hour in a frantic, ever-widening circle of a search. You check the neighbors' pens, you walk the perimeter of the village, you scan the open fields. You call her name until your throat is raw, the sound seeming small and foolish in the vast morning quiet. Nothing. The broken latch nags at you. It looks less like it was forced by a predator and more like it was fiddled with, undone. There is only one place left to look. The forest. The thought sends a genuine shiver of fear through you. All of Elspeth's stories from the night before come flooding back. The lost traveler, the stolen child. You stand at the edge of the woods, at the very stone wall where you sometimes leave an offering, and you stare into the deep, intimidating shadows. Every instinct, every lesson you have ever learned, screams at you to turn back, to cut your losses, to accept that the goat is gone. A lost animal is a terrible blow, but your life is more valuable. But then you think of the coming winter, of the meager pantry, of the sharp pang of hunger. The milk, the cheese, they are not luxuries. They are surviving. Next, she tells the story of Thomas the farmer, a cautionary tale about the dangers of bargains. Thomas was a good man but proud, Elspeth begins. And one year the rains wouldn't come. His crops withered in the fields. He had a wife and new baby to feed. In his desperation he went to the edge of the forest, to the old hawthorn tree, and he asked for help. He promised them anything. The fire pops, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. The next day the rains came. A gentle, steady rain that lasted 3 days and saved his crops. He had the best harvest of his life. He grew rich, but he forgot his promise. On the child's first birthday, the cradle was found empty. Not a sound had been heard. They never saw the babe again. Thomas's wealth turned to ash in his mouth. The message is clear and brutal. Their help is not a gift. It is a loan, and the interest is always impossibly high. You do not ask them for favors. You do not make deals. You keep to your side of the boundary and they will, perhaps, keep to theirs. You often wonder if these stories are true accounts, or just warnings dressed up as memories. Some folklorists of the future will argue these tales were a form of social control, a way to keep people on the straight and narrow path, to discourage greed or straying too far from the village. But as the firelight dances on Elspeth's ancient face, making deep shadows in the hollows of her cheeks, it's impossible not to believe. The fear in the room feels too real, too old. Finally, she tells the darkest story of all, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It is the story of the changeling. You remember the weaver's boy? A beautiful, happy child. Laughed all the time. Then one afternoon, his mother left him sleeping in his cradle near an open window while she went to the well. When she came back, the child in the cradle was different. It looked the same, but it did nothing but scream. It was a thin, constant wail that curdled the milk and frayed the nerves. It would not be soothed. It grew sickly and pale, and its eyes seemed too old, too knowing. A chill runs through you. This is the greatest fear. That they will steal a human child and leave one of their own in its place, an old, withered fairy disguised as a baby. Elspeth leans forward. They tried everything. Hung iron scissors over the cradle. Left out bread and salt. But the thing just wailed. The weaver and his wife became shadows of themselves, worn down by the sorrow and the sound. The story hangs in the air, unfinished, its ending too terrible to speak aloud. As if sensing the heavy mood, Elspeth offers a strange, practical piece of advice. But if one should ever follow you, she says, her tone becoming brisk, you spill a handful of seeds on the path behind you, or salt. They are compelled to stop and count every grain before they can continue. It will give you time to get to safety. This odd, quirky tradition that the great and terrible Fae can be distracted by a mundane counting task is a small comfort, a sliver of human cunning against their vast and unknowable magic. The fire is burning low now, the logs collapsing into a soft, glowing pile of embers. The stories are done. One by one, the neighbors get up to leave, pulling their cloaks tight and murmuring their good nights before slipping out into the impenetrable darkness. Soon you are alone again with the dying fire. The tales of the evening cling to the air like smoke, a fresh layer of caution settled over your soul. Your hands are rough, your life is hard, but it is your own. And as you bank the fire for the night, you know you will do whatever it takes to keep it that way. The next morning, the rhythm of life is broken. You wake, tend the fire, and step outside into the pale, misty dawn, and a cold knot of unease tightens in your stomach. Your goat, a stubborn, clever creature named Daisy who provides you with precious milk, is gone. Her small pen is empty, the gate swinging slightly in the breeze, a wooden latch broken. Perhaps it was a wolf, but there are no tracks, no signs of a struggle. She has simply vanished. You spend the first hour in a frantic, ever-widening circle of a search. You check the neighbors' pens, you walk the perimeter of the village, you scan the open fields. You call her name until your throat is raw, the sound seeming small and foolish in the vast morning quiet. Nothing. The broken latch nags at you. It looks less like it was forced by a predator and more like it was fiddled with, undone. There is only one place left to look. The forest. The thought sends a genuine shiver of fear through you. All of Elspeth's stories from the night before come flooding back. the lost traveler, the stolen child. You stand at the edge of the woods, at the very stone wall where you sometimes leave an offering, and you stare into the deep, intimidating shadows. Every instinct, every lesson you have ever learned, screams at you to turn back, to cut your losses, to accept that the goat is gone. A lost animal is a terrible blow, but your life is more valuable. But then you think of the coming winter, of the meager pantry, of the sharp pang of hunger. The milk, the cheese, they are not luxuries. They are surviving. Your hands, rough and capable, clench into fists at your side. The fear is real, but the threat of starvation is real too. And so the choice is made. Practicality for now must outweigh superstition. You prepare carefully. You put the hard crust of bread in your pocket. You check that the small iron knife is secure at your belt. You whisper a quiet, half-remembered prayer to no one in particular, a plea for safety. Then, with a deep breath that does little to calm the frantic beating of your heart, you climb over the low stone wall and step into the woods. The change is immediate. The air grows cooler, heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The sounds of the village, the distant rooster, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer are instantly muffled, replaced by the profound, watchful silence of the trees. The light filters down in strange, shifting patterns, dappled and unreliable. It is a world unto itself. You move slowly at first, sticking to what seems like a faint animal trail. "Daisy," you call out, your voice absorbed by the moss and leaves, a feeble sound with no echo. You push aside a heavy, wet fern, its spores leaving a dusting of yellow on your sleeve. A twig snaps under your boot, and the sound is unnervously loud. You feel clumsy here, an intruder. You can't be sure if the goat simply wandered or if it was lured. The old stories are full of tales of the good folk tempting away livestock out of mischief or malice. Some say it's a way to test people to see if they are foolish enough to follow, or it's a way to draw them in. You try to push the thought away and focus on the practical task, searching for hoof prints in the soft earth, for a snag of coarse white hair on a thorny branch. But the idea lingers, a cold presence at the back of your mind. You walk deeper in. An hour passes, or maybe it's two. It's hard to tell in here. The sun is hidden by the canopy, and the landscape is maddeningly repetitive. Every moss-covered oak looks like the last one. Every cluster of ferns seems identical to the one you just passed. A sense of disorientation begins to creep in. You stop and turn around, trying to get your bearings, but you can no longer be certain which direction you came from. The path you thought you were following has disappeared. A prickle of panic, cold and sharp, runs up your spine. This is how it begins in the stories. This is the feeling of being led astray. You remember another piece of Elspeth's advice, a quirky old folk tradition for just this situation. It's for when you believe you are pixie-led, caught in a fairy glamour that confuses your senses. With fumbling fingers, you untie your apron and then tie it back inside out. The belief is that reversing a piece of your clothing confuses the spirits, breaking their enchantment. Feels like a silly, desperate thing to do. And yet, the small, deliberate action calms you. It is something to do, a way to impose a tiny piece of human order on this overwhelming, chaotic place. Whether it's the charm or just the act of stopping to think, your panic subsides to a low, manageable hum of anxiety. You take another deep breath, the forest air cools in your lungs, and you listen. You close your eyes and strain your ears, trying to filter out the whisper of the leaves and the creak of the branches. You listen for anything familiar, and then you hear it, faint but unmistakable, the distressed bleat of a goat. It seems to be coming from somewhere off to your left, deeper still. A surge of relief and determination washes through you. She's alive. She's caught on something, perhaps. Without a second thought, you turn and push your way through the undergrowth, moving faster now, your only focus on that small, desperate sound. The unspoken rules, the warnings, the fear, they are all momentarily forgotten, eclipsed by the simple driving need to retrieve what is yours. You are heading deeper into the heart of the woods, and you are not turning back. You follow the sound of the bleeding, your hope overriding your caution. You push through a curtain of hanging moss and stumble into a clearing. And then you stop, dead in your tracks. There is Daisy, your goat, just as you'd hoped. She is tangled by her rope in the exposed roots of a gigantic ancient oak tree that dominates the center of the space. Relief floods through you, so potent it almost makes your knees weak. But the relief is immediately followed by a new and much deeper sense of unease. Something is wrong with this place. The first thing you notice is the silence. It is not the normal quiet of the deep woods, which is always humming with a subtle background of life. The buzz of an insect, the distant call of a bird, the whisper of wind in the leaves. This is an absolute, profound silence. It presses in on you, heavy and watchful, as if the entire forest is holding its breath. The only sounds are the frantic, panicked bleats of your goat and the sudden, loud thumping of your own heart. Then you become aware of the light. The clearing is a perfect circle, and the light that fills it is unlike any you have ever seen. It's not the warm, golden light of the sun, nor the cool, gray light of an overcast day. It is a clear, silvery light, even and shadowless, as if it is coming from the very air itself. It makes everything look sharp and hyperreal. The green of the moss that carpets the ground is so vibrant it almost hurts your eyes. A patch of toadstools growing on the great oak's roots are a shade of impossible, jewel-like red. The colors are too bright, too perfect. It feels less like a real place and more like a masterful painting of a place. You take a hesitant step forward, the soft moss cushioning your footfall, making no sound. The air on your skin feels different here. It's still and thick, carrying a strange, tingling energy, like the moment before a lightning strike. And it carries a scent. A sweet, cloying perfume of flowers you can't name. Something like honeysuckle and night-blooming jasmine mixed together. It's a beautiful smell, but it is wrong for this time of year and for this deep in the woods. It is an unnatural sweetness. You wonder if you have simply stumbled into a unique, secluded part of the forest, a trick of the light and acoustics causing the strange quiet. Ecologists of the future might try to explain it as a microclimate, a peculiar confluence of natural phenomena. But in your bones you feel a different, older truth. This is not a place you were meant to find. This is their place. This clearing feels like one of the fairy rings from Elspeth's stories. Not a ring of mushrooms, but a place set apart, a thinning of the veil between the worlds. All the ingrained fear you suppressed to begin your search comes rushing back, cold and overwhelming. The need to get your goat and leave is no longer just practical, it is primal. You force your legs to move, walking quickly towards the oak tree. Your hands, rough and trembling slightly, begin to work on the tangled rope. Daisy is frantic, pulling against the rope and making your task harder. "Hush now," you whisper, your voice a tiny foreign sound in the immense quiet. "Hush, we're going." As you work, you can't help but look at the tree. It is impossibly old, its bark like a wrinkled gray hide, its branches so vast they seem to hold up the sky. It feels less like a tree and more like a sleeping giant. A deep, instinctual part of you knows that this is a place of power, a place where the normal rules of the world are suspended. The air changes. The light changes. The very feeling of time seems to warp and slow down. The sweet, floral scent is stronger now, almost dizzying. The silvery light seems to pulse with a faint, inner luminescence. You feel exposed, vulnerable, a clumsy mortal trespassing in a cathedral of ancient magic. The normal rhythm of life, with its predictable chores and seasons, feels a million miles away. Here, the rhythm is something else entirely, something slow and strange and utterly alien. You have to get the knot undone. You have to get out. No. The silence seems to be listening. The light seems to be watching. And you feel, with a terrifying certainty, that you are not alone. The final knot gives way. The rope comes free in your hands. Daisy, your goat, is untangled. For a single fleeting moment, you feel nothing but pure, focused relief. You have done it. You have faced the forest and won. You turn to lead the goat away, back the way you came, back to the world you understand. And that is when it happens. The oppressive silence that filled the clearing does not break. It dissolves. It is replaced by the sound of music. It is faint at first, like a half-remembered dream, and it seems to come from no single direction, but from the silvery air itself. It is the sound of tiny, delicate bells or a high, sweet flute, playing a melody that is both joyful and deeply melancholic. The music is more beautiful than anything you have ever heard. It bypasses your ears and seems to resonate deep inside your bones, in a place that has always been empty and has ached for something it could not name. The sound is a hook. It snags your soul. You find you have stopped moving, your hands slack on the rope, your entire being focused on this impossible, heartbreakingly lovely sound. All thoughts of leaving, of the village, of your own life, simply evaporate. There is only the music. As you stand there, mesmerized, you catch a flicker of movement at the very edge of your vision. It is quick, a darting motion to your right. You turn your head, but there is nothing there. Only the ancient, silver-barked trees standing silent sentinel. But in the spot where you thought you saw the movement, the air seems to shimmer, like the haze rising from hot stones after a summer rain. It bends the light in a strange, watery way. Then, through the shimmering air, you see a flash of color. It is a brilliant, incandescent blue, the color of a kingfisher's wing but 1,000 times brighter, the color of a sky you have never seen. It flits past, a tiny comet of pure pigment, and vanishes. You blink, trying to make sense of what you saw. It was not a bird. It was not a butterfly. It was simply blue. A piece of impossible color, wild and free in this strange, silent place. The music swells, the shimmering intensifies, and a wave of feeling washes over you, so powerful it makes you gasp. It is a profound and overwhelming sense of longing. A deep, sorrowful ache for this beauty, for this secret, hidden world. You suddenly feel that your own life, with its hard work and simple routines, is a dull, gray thing. Your hands are rough. Your cottage is small. The rhythm of life is a plodding, boring dance. Here, there is magic. Here is beauty. You feel an almost irresistible urge to take a step forward towards the great oak tree, to find the source of the music, to see that impossible blue again. Just one more look, just one more note. Was it real? Or was it just a waking dream, a hallucination brought on by fear and the strange silvery light? Future neurologists might talk about the tricks the mind can play under stress, the way sensory deprivation can cause the brain to create its own reality. But the feeling of that longing was more real than the solid ground beneath your feet. Some things you realize don't have to be seen to be true. It is the goat that saves you. Daisy, your simple, stubborn, worldly goat, is immune to the enchantment. She feels only the unnatural stillness and the strange, thick quality of the air. Her animal instinct screams that this is a place of danger. She lets out a loud, terrified bleat and yanks hard on the rope in your hand. The sudden, sharp tug is like being doused with cold water. The spell is broken. The music doesn't stop, but it retreats to the background. The shimmering air seems less significant. The overwhelming longing recedes, leaving behind the cold, hard clarity of fear. You look down at the rope in your hand, a solid, real thing connecting you to this solid, real animal. The goat is your anchor. She is a piece of your world and she is pulling you back to it. You shake your head, a violent, shuddering motion to clear the last of the glamour away. You do not look back towards the center of the clearing. You do not dare. You turn your back on the music and the light and you begin to run, stumbling through the moss, pulling the terrified goat behind you. You flee the clearing, plunging back into the ordinary, welcome shadows of the deep woods, the impossible, beautiful music fading behind you with every desperate step. You run. You do not know for how long or in what direction. You simply flee, crashing through undergrowth, dodging low-hanging branches, the goat's rope held tight in a white-knuckled grip. Your breath comes in ragged, burning gasps. Your only thought is to put as much distance as possible between yourself and that silent, silver-lit clearing. Finally, your legs give out. You stumble to a halt, leaning heavily against the rough bark of a beech tree, chest heaving. Daisy collapses in a heap beside you, shivering. For a long moment, the only sound is your own desperate breathing and the frantic drumming of your heart against your ribs. Slowly, your senses begin to return to normal. The world comes back into focus. You are in a part of the forest that feels ordinary. The light is just light, filtering down in familiar, gentle beams. You can hear the cheerful chirp of a finch somewhere nearby. The air smells of nothing more than damp earth and trees. The oppressive, magical atmosphere is gone. You have escaped. The relief is a physical wave that leaves you weak and trembling. You slide down the trunk of the tree to sit on the ground, pulling the goat close for comfort, stroking her coarse fur until her shivering subsides. After a few minutes of rest, you know you must move on. You need to find your way home before dusk. You get to your feet, take a moment to get your bearings from the position of the sun, and begin walking, moving with a new and profound sense of caution. Your frantic escape has left you even more disoriented than before. You find a deer trail and follow it, hoping it will lead you towards the edge of the woods. The path is narrow, winding between ancient trees. And it is there, in the middle of the path, that you see it. Lying on a bed of impossibly green moss is a small object, catching the light in a way that seems unnatural. You stop, your hand tightening on the goat's rope. It is a bird, carved from a piece of wood so dark it is almost black. It is no bigger than your thumb, but the detail is exquisite, impossible. Every tiny feather is perfectly rendered. Its head is cocked to one side, and its polished, obsidian eyes seem to glitter with a life of their own. The craftsmanship is so far beyond anything you have ever seen, it might as well have been grown rather than carved. It is the most beautiful, perfect thing you can imagine. Your first impulse is a simple, powerful surge of desire. To pick it up. To feel its impossible smoothness in your rough, calloused hands. Such an object would be a treasure. It could be sold for more money than you would see in a year. Or it could be kept, a secret piece of beauty in your simple, hard-working life. You take a half step forward, your fingers twitching. Then the cold dread returns. You remember Elspeth's voice by the fireside, speaking of treasures found in the woods. Objects left on a fairy path, one of the invisible roads the gentry travel. To take what is theirs, she had said, is to invite them into your life. It is to create a debt that they will come to collect. It is another trap, more beautiful and more subtle than the enchanting music, but a trap nonetheless. A gift from them is never a gift. It is a hook. It is a chain. A rational mind might say it was just a lost trinket, dropped by a wealthy traveler long ago. A beautiful, lucky find. But you know with a certainty that settles deep in your gut that this was not lost. It was placed right here, directly in your path. It was a test, or perhaps a payment. For what? For your intrusion into their sacred place? For your escape? Is this a price for your freedom or a lure to take it away again? The ambiguity is terrifying. You stand frozen, caught in a silent battle with yourself. The bird seems to call to you, promising beauty, wealth, and escape from the daily grind. It is a tantalizing glimpse of a world without struggle. But you see the faces from the stories in your mind. The man whose hair turned white in a single night. The farmer whose child was taken. You look down at your own hands, at the calluses and scrapes that tell the story of your life. It is a hard life, a poor life, but it is your life. The rhythm of life in your village may be slow and predictable, but it is real. The bird is a beautiful lie. With a strength you didn't know you possessed, you make a decision. You will not touch it. You deliberately take a step to the side of the path, giving the shining object a wide berth. You pull on Daisy's rope, urging her forward. The goat needs no encouragement. She seems to shy away from the carved bird as if it were a hot coal. You walk past it. You do not look down. You keep your eyes fixed on the path ahead. Every step away from it feels like a victory. You do not run but walk with a steady, determined pace. You do not look back. You leave the beautiful, perfect, dangerous thing behind you in the woods, a silent offering to the mystery you have just survived. Leaving the carved bird behind feels like closing a door. You walk on and soon you feel a genuine shift in the woods around you. The trees seem to stand a little farther apart. More light penetrates the canopy, and it is the honest, warm light of late afternoon. You hear a familiar sound, the distant, rhythmic clang of a hammer on an anvil. The blacksmith. The sound is a beacon, a promise of home. Hope gives you a new surge of energy. You walk faster, your steps more certain. The trees continue to thin, and then through a gap you see it, a curl of gray smoke rising into the sky. The sight is so beautiful, so welcome, it brings a lump to your throat. Soon you are standing at the edge of the tree line, looking out over the familiar fields of your village. You have made it. You are back. You step out from the shadows of the forest into the full, glorious sunlight. The warmth on your face is a blessing. The sky above is vast and open and an ordinary, gentle blue. The world feels solid and real again. You take a deep, shuddering breath, filling your lungs with the familiar air, thick with the smell of wood smoke and livestock. You are exhausted down to your very bones, but you are safe. Your first act is to lead Daisy back to her pen. Your hands, rough and steady now, secure the broken latch with a piece of rope, tying a firm, deliberate knot. The simple, physical task is grounding. This is real. The goat is real. The pen is real. You lean your forehead against the warm, solid wood of the gatepost for a long moment, just breathing. When you finally turn and walk back towards the village proper, everything looks the same, yet feels entirely different. You see your neighbors engaged in the simple evening rhythm of life. A woman sweeps her doorstep. Two men mend a fishing net, their conversation punctuated by easy laughter. Children are chasing a stray dog down the muddy lane. Yesterday this was the whole world. Today you see it as a small, fragile island of light and noise, surrounded by a vast, silent ocean of green. You feel a strange sense of detachment, as if you are watching a play. These people, your friends and neighbors, have no idea. Their fears of the forest are abstract, a collection of stories told around the fire. Your fear is now a memory. You have been inside the story. You have heard the music. You ask yourself again if your mind was playing tricks on you. Psychologists centuries from now might call it a trauma response, the mind creating a vivid narrative to cope with the terror of being lost and alone. Perhaps. But the memory feels too solid, too sensory. The impossible silvery light, the scent of phantom flowers, the piercing beauty of the music, it doesn't feel like a story you made up. It feels like a place you visited. As you walk, you catch the eye of Elspeth, the old storyteller. She is sitting on a bench outside her cottage, her hands still. She looks at you and her gaze is sharp and knowing. There is no surprise in her eyes, only a quiet, ancient sadness. She gives you the slightest of nods, a gesture so small that anyone else would miss it. In that one silent moment, you feel a shock of recognition. She knows. Or if she doesn't know what happened to you specifically, she knows the possibility. She has seen that look in someone's eyes before. You feel a sudden, powerful urge to go to her, to pour out the whole story. But you don't. Words feel too clumsy, too small to describe what you experienced. The secret is a heavy, smooth stone in your heart, and it is yours to carry alone. You are marked now, not by a scratch or a scar, but by this knowledge. You feel as though you have developed a kind of second sight. As you look at the woods, you no longer see just trees. You see a threshold. You see the deep, watchful silence. You feel the presence of the other world humming just beneath the surface of your own. The veil between the worlds, which was once just a phrase in a story, has become thin and real to you. You reach your own cottage and slip inside, dropping the latch behind you. The familiar, dim interior has never felt so welcoming, so safe. You have returned from the other country. But you know with a certainty that will never leave you, that a part of you is still there, standing in a silver-lit clearing, forever listening to a beautiful, impossible song. A few days pass, but they bring no peace. You try to lose yourself in the familiar rhythm of life, to focus on the simple, repetitive tasks of your day. You weed the garden, you mend your clothes, you churn butter. Your hands are rough with the comforting friction of work. But your mind is elsewhere. The world feels thin, and at the edges of your hearing, in the moments of quiet between the village sounds, you sometimes think you can hear the faint, sweet echo of that impossible music. Sleep offers little escape, filled with dreams of silver light and shifting shadows. The memory of Elspeth's knowing gaze is a constant presence. It was more than sympathy, it was an invitation. You realize you cannot carry this weight alone. She is the keeper of the old ways, the one who understands the things that have no names. In the village, she is known as a cunning woman, a title spoken with a mixture of respect and fear. She is the one you go to for a poultice that will draw out infection, for a tea that will soothe the fever, and for advice on matters the priest cannot touch. On the third evening, as dusk settles its purple cloak over the village, You find yourself walking the short path to her cottage. You knock softly on the heavy wooden door. After a moment, it creaks open. Elspeth stands there, holding a small rushlight, her wrinkled face illuminated in the flickering glow. She does not look surprised to see you. She simply steps back and gestures for you to enter. Her home smells incredible. It is an overwhelming but not unpleasant wave of 100 different dried plants, of beeswax, of wood smoke, and something else, something sharp and clean like resin. Bunches of herbs hang from every rafter like a strange, fragrant forest. The shelves are crammed not with pottery and tools, but with glass bottles of dark liquids, bundles of feathers tied with red thread, strangely shaped stones, and bowls of seeds and dried berries. Her cottage does not feel like a home. It feels like a workshop, a place that sits on the very border between your world and another. She gestures for you to sit on a small stool by her hearth, where a tiny, well-behaved fire crackles. She moves with a slow, deliberate grace, preparing a drink for you in a small clay mug. She doesn't speak, and the silence allows you to gather your thoughts. When she hands you the warm mug, her hand brushing yours, you begin to speak. You don't tell her everything at once. You start with the goat, the feeling of being lost, the strangeness of the woods. You talk around the edges of the experience, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. She listens, her head tilted, her ancient eyes never leaving your face. She does not interrupt. She does not need you to explain. She already knows. When you finally fall silent, staring into the steaming, fragrant tea, she speaks. Her voice is low and calm. "You walked the border," she says simply, "and you were seen. That is why the world feels different to you now. Your eyes have been opened a little wider than is comfortable." You ask her what they are, these presences in the forest. Elspeth is quiet for a long moment, staring into her own fire. "Some say they are the old gods, diminished when the new faith came," she murmurs, her voice a dry whisper. "Others, that they are the souls of those who died unchristened, unable to find rest. And some believe they are a people of their own, a race as old as the hills themselves." She shakes her head slowly. "It is not for us to know what they are. It is only for us to know that they are, and to be careful." She gets up and takes a small bundle of dried twigs from a hook on the wall. The leaves are small and delicate, and the branches are a pale, silvery gray. "Rowan," she says, pressing it into your hands, "the tree of protection. Hang this over your door with the iron. It will strengthen the threshold." Her advice is not grand or magical. It is small, practical, and deeply traditional. She tells you to sew a tiny iron pin into the hem of your cloak, so you will always carry its protection with you. She gives you a small cloth bag of dried herbs. "This is for your sleep," she explains, "to quiet the mind and keep the music from finding you in your dreams." You feel a profound sense of relief washing over you. She has not dismissed your fears. She has given them a name and a context. She has given you tools, simple and physical, to fight back against the fear. She does not promise that the memory will fade, but she gives you a way to live with it. She explains that the good folk are not evil, not in the way humans understand it. They are like fire or a deep river, beautiful, powerful, and utterly indifferent to your safety. You have touched the fire and not been consumed. Now you must learn to respect its warmth from a safe distance. You finish the tea. It is bitter but warming, and it seems to settle the disquiet in your soul. You thank her, your voice thick with an emotion you cannot name. She simply pats your hand. "Be at peace," she says. "The rhythm of life is strong. It knows how to heal. Let it." You leave her cottage and step back out into the cool night air. The world no longer feels thin and terrifying. It feels knowledgeable again. You hold the bundle of rowan twigs and the small bag of herbs in your hands. They are anchors, tangible pieces of wisdom to hold on to. You have not been given a magic spell, but something far more valuable. A way to find your footing back in your own life. You return to your cottage under a sky now dusted with a faint scattering of stars. The small, solid shape of your home against the darkness is the most reassuring sight in the world. Inside, the embers of your fire still glow with a soft, orange light. Before you do anything else, you perform the small rituals Elspeth prescribed. You take the bundle of rowan twigs, their leaves smelling faintly of almond and green wood, and you use a piece of twine to hang it from a small peg on the doorframe, right beside the old, rust-pocked iron nail. The two objects together, the metal and the wood, the man-made and the wild, feel like a complete sentence. A statement of purpose. This threshold is sealed. This home is a sanctuary. You get ready for bed, the simple, familiar motions a comfort in themselves. You place the small cloth pouch of herbs Elspeth gave you under your simple pillow. It smells of chamomile and lavender and something else, something earthy and calming that quiets the frantic edges of your mind. As you lie down under your coarse wool blanket, you do not feel the familiar dread of the past few nights. The conversation with Elspeth has eased the heaviest burden of the secret. The world still feels wider and stranger than it did a week ago, but it no longer feels actively hostile. Her words echo in your mind that the spirits are like forces of nature, not good, not evil, just powerful. And this thought leads you down a different path of memory. You realize that not all the stories told by the fire were warnings. Not all unseen things were to be feared. Your mind drifts back to tales of another kind of spirit, one not of the wild, untamed forest, but of the home and the hearth itself. You remember the stories of the brownie. Unlike the beautiful, terrifying, and dangerously alien gentry of the woods, the brownie was said to be a small, solitary creature, often described as a little man with a brown, wrinkled face, dressed in ragged brown clothes. He was shy, nocturnal, and deeply attached to a specific human family or homestead. He lived in the unused corners of the house, in the cellar, in the attic, or even, some said, in a small hole by the side of the hearth. If the family was good and hard-working, the brownie would consider himself a part of the household. And at night, after everyone was asleep, he would emerge and help. The stories were full of his quiet, unseen labors. A tired weaver would wake to find her spinning miraculously finished. A farmer would go to the barn to find the grain threshed. The butter churn would seem to work faster. The kitchen would be tidier in the morning than it was the night before. Your hands are rough and your work is endless. The idea of a secret, magical helper is a deeply comforting one. The price for this help was small and very specific. A bowl of good cream or fresh milk, left on the hearthstone every night. It was not a payment. It was a gift, a sign of mutual respect. In fact, one of the strangest parts of the stories was the taboo against giving the brownie a direct payment, or, most especially, a gift of new clothes. To do so was to deeply offend him. He would see it as a sign that he was a mere servant, or perhaps the fine clothes would make him too proud for simple chores. Whatever the reason, a gift of clothing would cause him to vanish forever, and the family's luck would vanish with him. You wonder if the brownie stories were a kind of comfort. A way of explaining a sudden stroke of good luck, or a task that seemed to finish itself when you were exhausted. Some historians might say these stories encourage domestic tidiness and generosity. Leave your kitchen clean and a bowl of milk out, and the rhythm of life will be easier. But as you lie there in the quiet dark, another thought occurs to you. Maybe the stories were a reminder that the spirit world was not a monolith, that not all unseen things are to be feared, that help could come from unexpected, invisible hands. You think of other similar creatures from the tales. The pixies from the western counties who could be helpful to the elderly and kind, but were also famously mischievous, delighting in leading travelers astray. It seems even the helpful spirits had a wild, unpredictable streak. The reflection is soothing. It rebalances your new, wider view of the world. The terror of the silver-lit clearing is still real, but you can now place it in a larger context. The unseen world is complex. It holds the beautiful, dangerous fae, but it also holds the possibility of the humble, helpful brownie. It is an ecosystem of magic with predators and pests, but also with quiet symbiosis. You turn over, the scent from the herbal pouch rising to meet you. For the first time at night, your mind feels calm. The fear has receded, replaced by a deep and quiet sense of wonder. Your cottage feels safe, protected by iron and rowan, and perhaps, you think with a small, sleepy smile, watched over by other, friendlier presences. The world is full of mystery, but tonight, that mystery feels less like a threat and more like a vast, unexplored country, full of both shadows and hidden friends. And on that comforting thought, you finally drift into a deep and dreamless sleep. The peace of your dreamless sleep carries you through the next few days. You find your footing again in the steady, familiar rhythm of life. The herbs from Elspeth quiet your dreams, and the rowan over the door seems to hold the deepest shadows of the night at bay. The memory of the forest is still there, a vivid, indelible mark on your soul, but it is no longer a source of constant terror. It is simply a part of who you are now, a secret knowledge you carry in a quiet, protected corner of your heart. One morning, you join the other women of the village at the stream to wash clothes. It is a communal task, a time for gossip and shared work. The sun is warm, the water is cold against your skin, and the sounds are familiar. The rhythmic beating of wet cloth against the smooth, flat river stones, the chatter of voices, the laughter of children playing nearby. Your hands are rough and the lye soap is harsh, but the work is honest and straightforward. But today the usual cheerful atmosphere is muted. A low current of anxiety runs through the group. Your eyes are drawn to a young woman named Isabel, the weaver's wife. She works a little apart from the others, her movements slow and heavy, as if her limbs are weighted with lead. Her face is pale and drawn, with dark, bruised-looking circles under her eyes. She looks like she hasn't slept properly in weeks. From her small cottage, just up the bank from the stream, comes a sound that sets your teeth on edge. It is the sound of a baby crying. But it is not the healthy, angry cry of a hungry infant. It is a thin, reedy, and incessant wailing, a sound that has no strength but also no end. It is the sound of pure, inconsolable misery. You realize with a jolt that this is the family from Elspeth's story. The story was not a relic from the past. It is a tragedy unfolding in your midst right now. Two older women, their backs turned to Isabel, are speaking in hushed, urgent tones. You are not trying to eavesdrop, but their whispers carry over the sound of the water. It never stops, one of them murmurs, beating a linen sheet with unnecessary force. Day and night. A human child doesn't cry like that. And the way it looks at you, the other replies, her voice dropping even lower. Its eyes are too old, too clever. And it eats more than my grown son, but it's nothing but skin and bones. It's not right. They fall silent as Isabel's husband, the weaver, comes out of the cottage. He looks as exhausted as his wife. He doesn't speak, just collects a bucket of fresh water and disappears back inside, the wailing sound momentarily louder as the door opens and closes. They say he wanted to test it, the first woman whispers, a shiver in her voice, with a hot poker from the fire, to see if it would reveal its true form and flee. But Isabel won't have it. She still thinks it's her son. The words send a sliver of ice through your veins. The terrible whispered cures. The belief that tormenting the creature in the cradle would force the fairies to return the stolen human baby. Historians and folklorists of the future will see the changeling myth as a tragic manifestation of communal stress and a profound lack of medical knowledge. It was a dark and desperate story created to explain the unexplainable. A baby's sudden illness, a congenital condition, a developmental disability that had no name. But for the women whispering by the stream, the explanation is not a story. It is the simple, terrible truth. The beautiful, healthy child is gone, stolen away to the fairy realm, and this shrieking, withered creature has been left in its place. You look at Isabel's slumped shoulders, at the raw grief on her face. You wonder what is worse, to believe your child is desperately ill and might die, or to believe your child is already gone, replaced by a monster you are still forced to care for. The fairy glamour you experienced in the woods was terrifying, but it was fleeting. This is a different kind of enchantment, a slow, grinding horror that has taken root in the heart of a family, poisoning their lives from the inside out. Your own journey into the woods has changed you. A week ago, you might have dismissed the women's whispers as cruel gossip. Now you cannot. You have heard the unearthly music. You have seen the impossible light. You know that the veil is thin and that things can be taken. The whispers by the stream don't sound like superstition anymore. They sound like a diagnosis. And the sound of that thin, constant wailing from the cottage is the most terrifying sound you have ever heard. The sharp, sorrowful sound of the weaver's child crying becomes a grim background note to the rhythm of village life. It is a constant, nagging reminder of the dangers that lie just beyond the veil. As the days shorten and the first chill of autumn sharpens the air, a familiar ancient tension begins to build in the community. The harvest is nearly complete, the days are growing shorter, and the long, dark winter looms. This is the time of year when the boundary between the worlds is said to grow thin and permeable. It is a time for caution, for remembrance, and for tribute. One evening, just as the sun is setting, casting long golden fingers of light across the harvested fields, the village prepares for its most solemn ritual. There is no festive music, no loud celebration. Instead, a quiet, purposeful air settles over the cottages. Tonight, you will pay your respects to the neighbors, the silent ones, the ones who own the land and merely allow you to live upon it. In your own cottage you prepare your offering. It feels deeply personal this year. You take your best clay bowl, the one without any chips, and fill it with fresh, creamy milk from Daisy. Your goat, whose return from the woods now feels nothing short of miraculous, watches you with her strange, knowing yellow eyes. To the milk, you add a piece of honeycomb, a perfect, golden square dripping with amber nectar. Your hands are rough as you handle the delicate offering, and you do so with a reverence that borders on prayer. This is an offering of gratitude for what was returned, and a plea for continued peace. You join the slow, silent procession of your neighbors as they walk towards the edge of the forest. Nearly every household is represented. People carry their own small tributes: a freshly baked oat cake, a beautifully shaped apple, a small pat of rich, yellow butter. No one speaks. The only sounds are the soft shuffle of feet on the dusty path and the lowing of a distant cow. You do not go deep into the woods. You do not go anywhere near the place of the silver light. The procession stops at the ancient, gnarled hawthorn tree that stands as a silent sentinel at the forest's boundary. A large, flat, moss-covered stone lies at its base, worn smooth by time and tradition. This is the altar. One by one, in a slow and orderly fashion, people step forward to place their gifts upon the stone. An old man gently pours a stream of dark ale onto the moss. A young mother leaves a small, intricately braided loaf of bread. When it is your turn, you step forward and carefully set down your bowl of milk and honey. As you do, you murmur a few quiet, private words of thanks. You are not praying to a god. You are addressing a power, an ancient and unseen nation. You are a diplomat speaking on behalf of your small, fragile settlement. There is a darker undercurrent to this ritual, a reason for the solemnity that goes beyond mere respect. The old tales speak of a fairy tithe, a belief that every 7 years, the gentry must pay a tax to the powers of the underworld, and that this tax is often a mortal they have stolen. The offerings, the respect, the careful observance of the rules are all part of a desperate, ongoing negotiation to ensure that you or your children are not the ones chosen to pay that terrible price. You look at the small, humble gifts gleaming in the twilight. A modern observer might see this as a wasteful act, a foolish superstition. But you and your neighbors see it as an essential transaction, an insurance premium. It is a quiet, humble acknowledgement that you do not own this land, you merely share it, and your powerful, silent neighbors must be given their due. When the last offering has been left, the village retreats as one, walking backwards for the first few steps, a sign of respect before turning away from the woods. No one looks back to see if the gifts are taken. To do so would be a fatal breach of etiquette. A short distance away in a cleared field, a great bonfire has been built. As the last light fades from the sky, a torch is set to the wood. The flames catch quickly, leaping up with a roar, sending a shower of golden sparks into the deep purple of the evening sky. The fire is a celebration of the harvest, but it is also a shield. Its light pushes back the oppressive darkness. Its heat is a protective wall of purely human energy. The mood of the village shifts. The solemnity of the ritual gives way to a quiet, communal relief. Someone brings out a small, simple flute and begins to play a soft, familiar human tune. People gather around the comforting warmth of the fire, their faces lit by its friendly, flickering glow. You have done what you can. You have honored the ancient treaty. For now the balance is restored. You have faced the darkness and made your offering, and now you will turn your backs to it and huddle together in the light. You sit on a rough-hewn log, a safe distance from the bonfire, yet close enough to feel its immense, breathing warmth on your face. The cool autumn air at your back is a pleasant contrast. The quiet, human music of the flute winds its way through the murmur of conversation, a fragile but comforting thread of sound. Your neighbors' faces are relaxed in the flickering firelight, their anxieties eased by the completion of the ritual and the solid, reassuring presence of the fire. But your eyes are drawn away from the celebration, towards the darkness where the weaver's cottage stands. There are no lights in its windows. No figures stand at its door. The family is absent, enclosed in their private sorrow, isolated by a grief too strange and sharp for a communal festival. The thin, wailing cry is silent for once, a fact that is somehow more disturbing than the sound itself. Staring into the hypnotic dance of the flames, you begin to connect the pieces of your world in a new way. You think of the weaver's child, pale and shrieking in its cradle. You think of the old stories, the whispered cures, and the deep, abiding fear of the changeling. And you think of your own journey into the silver-lit clearing, the beautiful, terrifying music that nearly stole your will. They are not separate things. They are all part of the same vast, unwritten book of rules for survival in a world that is only partially understood. You ponder how these powerful stories have always been used to explain the sharp, unexpected blows of fate. In a world without doctors who can name a sickness, without scholars who can predict the weather, every misfortune needs a reason. And the reason so often comes from the other world. You remember 2 summers ago, a sudden blight turned half the oat crop black and rotten in the fields. It wasn't explained as a dampness in the air. It was blamed on mischievous pixies, who were said to have soured the fields after being offended by a farmer. You remember an old man who suffered a sudden sharp pain in his side that left him lame. He wasn't told he had a sickness of the body. He was said to be elf-shot, struck by an invisible arrow from a fairy hunting party. The stories are everywhere. A young woman falls into a wasting fever after sleeping on a grassy mound in the hills, one of the old burial sites that everyone knows is a fairy hill. A string of bad luck plagues a family after they build a new stone wall, and the village elders realize the wall has blocked a fairy path, an invisible road used by the gentry. The wall is torn down and the luck, it is said, returns to normal. The fairy world, you realize, is not just a place of wonder and terror. It is a vast and intricate explanation for the randomness of life and death. It gives a name to the invisible forces that can ruin a harvest, sicken a child, or steal a person's mind. It turns chaos into a narrative. And if a misfortune has a narrative, if it has a cause, a broken taboo, a forgotten offering, an act of disrespect, then it also, perhaps, has a solution. It gives you a sense of agency, however small. It allows you to do something. You can carry iron. You can hang a row. You can leave a bowl of milk at the threshold. Your hands are rough and the world is hard, but these actions are a way of pushing back, of trying to impose some small order on the terrible uncertainties of life. You watch the flames twist and turn into 100 different shapes, and you feel the blur. Where does the real world end and the story begin? Perhaps there is no line. Perhaps the story is just the shape that people give to the things they cannot see or understand. The human mind, you think, abhors a vacuum. It will always create a reason, a story, a monster to explain the darkness. But the question that lingers, the one that makes a shiver run down your spine despite the fire's heat, is this: what if the monsters are real? What if the story is simply the truth? You don't have an answer. You are not sure you even want one. You only know that your own experience in the woods felt true. The fear was true. The beauty was true. And the wisdom of your ancestors, passed down in stories and rituals around a fire just like this one, suddenly feels less like superstition and more like a profound and necessary science of the soul. The great bonfire collapses in on itself, its roaring voice softening to a deep, contented sigh. The last of the flute's notes has long since faded, and the villagers, wrapped in their cloaks and their own quiet thoughts, have begun to drift away, their sleepy children on their backs. Soon, all that is left is a vast, breathing bed of embers, painting the undersides of the lingering smoke with a gentle, pulsing orange glow. The festival is over. You rise from your seat and begin the walk home. The air is cold and clean, and the sky, free from the fire's glare, has opened up into an immense, dark velvet dome, scattered with the diamond dust of countless stars. You walk through the sleeping village, your footsteps the only sound. To your right, the forest stands as a solid wall of blackness against the horizon. You look at it, and for the first time you feel no fear. You do not feel the prickling anxiety of an intruder, nor the smug relief of an escapee. You feel a quiet, profound respect. It is a sovereign nation, ancient and powerful, and you are its neighbor. When you reach your cottage, your hand rests for a moment on the door. You touch the rough iron of the nail and the smooth, cool twigs of the rowan bundle. They are no longer just charms against a nameless dread. They are a statement of respectful boundaries. This is my space, they say. I am human and I live by the hearth. That is your space. You are of the woods and you live by the hill. A simple, honest treaty. Inside you do not light a candle. Moonlight, clear and white, streams through the small window, painting a silver square on the packed earth floor. You drop the latch, the familiar sound a soft thump in the stillness. You sit on the stool by the cold hearth, wrapping your arms around yourself and just breathe. You have come full circle. You have been ruled by a fear you didn't understand, plunged into the heart of the mystery that caused it, and have returned with a story you can never fully tell. And in the silent, silver-washed darkness of your own home, you find a kind of peace. You accept that you will never understand what happened in the woods. Was it a spirit? A glamour woven from light and sound? Was it simply a trick of a mind terrified by being lost? You realize, as a single ember in the hearth gives a final, soft sigh, that the answer does not matter. The experience changed you. The respect it taught you is real. The caution you have learned is real. The truth of a story you now understand is not always in its facts, but in the wisdom you carry away from it. The fear has been alchemized into awe. The world has not shrunk back to its old, familiar size. It has remained vast and strange, but your place in it now feels clearer. Your life is lived on the shoreline of a great, mysterious ocean. You cannot command the tides, you cannot know the secrets of the deep, but you can learn the rhythm of the waves. You can learn when to retreat to high ground and when it is safe to walk the shore. And that is enough. You look down at your hands resting in your lap. They are pale in the moonlight, the lines and calluses etched into them like a map of your life. They are rough, human hands, made for working soil and shaping wood and tending fire. They belong to this world. But you know now that this is not the only world. The rhythm of life is a song with more verses than you had ever imagined. You do not need to know all the words. It is enough just to listen, and to live your own small part of the song with as much grace and care as you can muster. With a final look at the moonlit square on the floor, You rise and go to your bed. You pull the wool blanket up to your chin and you close your eyes, feeling not fear, nor even comfort, but a deep, quiet, and abiding peace with the great and beautiful mystery of it all. And so, our journey to the edge of the fairy forest comes to a gentle close, the last of the bonfire's embers sighing into the deep and quiet dark. The stories have all been told, and the mysteries of the woods can now be left to their own silent watch, fading softly into the background as your mind begins its own slow, peaceful drift towards sleep. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to solve, only the simple and profound comfort of this moment, right here as you lie resting. Let go of the memory of the path, of the silver light, of the ancient trees, and feel only the gentle weight of your blankets and the soft support of the pillow beneath your head. Every long, slow breath you take is a wave, carrying you farther away from the shores of wakefulness and out into the calm, quiet ocean of your dreams. The world outside, with all its noise and its hurry, can fade away now, leaving only the profound peace of this safe and comfortable space you have created for yourself. The boundary between consciousness and sleep is a welcome and gentle threshold, and you can cross it now without a care. You are safe, you are comfortable, and all that is required of you now is to rest, to simply let go.